Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel.
Okay, now we're on to the front end, and while I was doing the other side, I also built the differential for the front, something else you've already seen and didn't need to watch me do it again. It is exactly the same parts, everything, same amount of grease. Now it is time to start. I would leave off the body posts for the time being because you're going to need specific body posts for the truck. Those are on a different sheet of instructions, and it's best doing those at the end. So now we are on to doing our front A-arms, and we need to put these little plastic ball sockets in place. I've also gone ahead and assembled the front steering knuckles, put the bearings in place, and have those ready, diff built. And I've cut off the front cap for the differential. It is exactly the same as the rear. That's one of the nice things about this kit. If you break apart, there's only so many plastic sheets or trees to purchase because a lot of the parts are repeats. This is the same, this part is the same, this part is the same. The only thing different is the A-arms. So again, you know, easily put together, easily figured out. It just makes everything nice and easy. So the parts we are looking for now are in this little bag here that has our servo saver and our primary steering arm. We'll do the steering arms. Those will come up shortly. First we got to get the front suspension in. So you take out that tree and you are left with these four little balls here with a hole in the center and a slot that allows them to be compressed a bit. And the way to do these easily, okay, I need a moment to get another tool. We're going to pop these little suckers in place. They need to be greased, and just as with the joints on these, I'm going to go ahead and use the dry lube again. I'll put it in once these are in place. So just take a pair of pliers and pop it in. It takes almost no effort. You can probably just do it with your fingers. I found it easier just to use the pair of pliers on them. Okay, I got ahead of myself for a moment there. I left out step number 9, and that's where we put on this bottom plate that allows for the mounting of the bumpers. It also locks the differential closed at the bottom by snapping over these two protrusions here, the squares that or rectangles, and that locks that bottom part closed. So we need a couple of countersunk 3x12s, and see, that's one of the things about this kit is there's a lot of little packages of hardware, and they're not all equally distributed. So you get to a point where you almost just open them all and figure out what's in there. And I think that's time for this pack. So let's see. Yes, it's these, they're kind of a brown color or a brassy color. Got the wrong one there. Okay, those are our 3x12. Okay, and now we need three 3x10s, and we're gonna see lots of those. We've already seen a bunch, and we're gonna see plenty more before we're done. It is probably the single most common piece of hardware in here. That's these. Oops. Slippery. I think I got a 12 here too. No, this is both the same. I got 10s. See, these three screws are being driven into this case here, and that case is the A sheet. That's the really hard plastic. So you've really got to be firm about driving those in, or they're not going to go in all the way. Okay, back around to the front. Now, I've already gone over these items here. I'm going to go ahead and work a little bit of this dry lube in here. Try and get that spread all around through this ball socket here. Wow, that's nice and smooth. It's going to be a bit messy doing this stuff because it sticks to everything, and it's a very fine powder. But I think it's going to be worth it because it definitely lubricates really well. It's just going to be a bit of a cleanup. You know, once you get it where you need it, then you got to wipe it off of everything else. Now these guys don't have a ton of motion, just a couple of degrees of rotation. But you definitely don't want to not put lube in here of one type or another. One of the things we used to use back in the day on the 12th scale pan cars, especially for the ball joint that handled the rear pivot of the suspension, because they were solid axle, was powdered graphite, basically lock lubricant. You can get it at almost any hardware store, and it's exactly what it says. It's just a fine graphite powder, and it's a dry lubricant, so it doesn't attract dirt or grime or dust. Okay, so we are on to step number 6, and this is where we're going to wait a minute, I gotta flip a page. should be 12. Okay, this is where you build your second diff, which I've already done. No point in showing you that since I've already shown you one diff put together. They are exactly the same. So now we need 2 bearings, just like we had back here, but they go in a different order. Back here we had one in front of the main drive gear, and then one on the back side of the diff case. This time we're going to have 2 of them together with a spacer. Now, where you find that spacer is on the tree that has the servo saver and the primary steering arm, and that is P3. So there's our bushing, and because this is the same size as the bearing, it's going to rub against the bearing, both inner and outer reese. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of grease on this. And we're going to slide these. Sorry, you're going to miss the camera angle, but we're just going to slide them onto the drive shaft. Bearing spacer bearing. And they just drop all the way down in like so. See if I can get this where you can see it. There. And then we're going to drop in our pinion gear. And you just rotate it until it drops onto the key. So you should see it basically be flush with the drive shaft here. And now things are going to go very similar to how they went at the back end. We've got our diff case, we've got our diff, and now you got to make sure that you orient the arms correctly. We can go ahead and put our bearings on to our diff. And remember, the differential gear goes to the is on the right hand side, which would be the ring gear to the pinion. Excuse me, I'm gonna pause for a moment. Okay, like the previous diff install and A-arm install, I've got the front end propped up here with a block, and I'm gonna put some of the AW grease on the teeth here, because as you saw, that will spread itself around quite easily. Okay, so everything goes together much the same. Make sure that you orient the arms correctly. That's fairly easy to figure this one out. You've got 2 arms that have a post with a hole. That's the lower shock absorber mounting point. So those are going to be your 2 bottom pieces. And then obviously the other 2 are the tops. You're going to want to grease those points with whatever lube you want. I'm going to be using the dry lube like I did before, and everything goes together just like the previous piece. You've got the 3 screws that are up here. Those are 2 3x15s and a 3x12. So let's just identify those again. And the 3x15s that you have 2 of are these darker screws. And then we have one 3x12, which look just like the 3x10s, but they're slightly longer. Again, you can just confirm that by holding them against the page in the instructions. So, since you've already seen this, I'm going to go ahead, stop the video. I'm going to lube up these sections here. I'm going to plug them in. I'm going to put on the back case. I'm going to put on the upper shock mount, and then screw this assembly together. You saw me do that in the rear, so this shouldn't be anything new. Once I've done that, we'll go on to putting on the steering arms and the outdrives, and start getting the front suspension finished. Again, similar to what we did in the rear, just the connection of the steering blocks is different. So basically they plug into these little oval things that we put in, and then you're going to screw a cap down. Now those caps, there's 4 of them, 2 for one above, 1 below, and then 2 for each side, so 4 altogether. You're going to find those on the 2A sheets. And then you're going to need 4 of the 3x10s, which we again see so many of. 2 for each side. And you're going to want to start by putting some grease on the dog bone. And you want to slide the outdrive into the diff. Just rotate it until it drops in. And then you can plug the 2A arms in to the steering block, and that's ready to be screwed permanently into place. So now, I also didn't show you bolting on the front bumper mount. It's the same as bolting on the rear bumper mount. Same screw combination. That was step 15. And step 16 I did earlier, which was just squeezing the bearings or bushings into the steering blocks. And now we are doing step 17, which we are going to do all of, with the exception of the body posts. Again, we'll do the body posts later. There is a sheet that is separate from the regular instructions that is specific to the body of the kit that we are building. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. You've seen one side. This side is just like the other. No point in showing you a second time. So I've trimmed out all the shock parts. We're on to step 18, and that's where we assemble the shock absorbers. It's a fairly simple setup. There's no oil or any grease involved. It's just a friction shock as far as the damping goes. So these cars do bounce a good bit, but you know, such is the nature of the spec class. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to start by taking one of these rings and putting it around the shock here like that. And you're going to take the spring and one of these bases to the shock. Now there's a slot here, and if you'll notice, there's also a little groove on the other side. If you look inside the shock body, there's two protrusions where those that are going to run into those grooves. So orient it and slide it in, and then twist a quarter turn, and that locks it in place. So there you've got your basic shock action. Okay, then you're going to slide a cap in and put the hole toward this side here where the hole in the shock is. And then you're going to take this clasp and insert it around, snap it around here so that the pin goes into the top. Like that. That locks the top cap on, and there is one shock absorber built. So I'm going to go through that again real quick for you. You can do it in whatever order you want. You could put on the cap first, take the clasp. Oh, I can go ahead and put that facing the opposite direction. There's a bit of a ring here, so you would point that down. I did that on the first one, but not on this one. So you can put on the cap first, then slide in the ring, take your spring, orient the grooves with the slots there, slide it in, turn it 90, shock. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, put the other two together. Since I've shown you twice, you know what to do. So now that our shocks are together, we're going to need 4 of these screws, at least for the front shocks, then we'll do the rear. Just show you up close what they look like. Now our mounting points, of course, are the 2 barrels down here on the arm, and then the 2 inner holes out of these. This hole here is countersunk, and that's for mounting body posts. You do have 2 potential shock locations. The directions call for using the inner location. You can tighten them down until they stop. The smooth portion here is long enough that there's a little bit of motion in the shock absorber. There's no need to grease these. Again, just screw it until it stops. So I'm going to repeat this over here, and then I'm going to spin the chassis around and do the 2 rear shocks. You use the same screws, the same mounting holes, nothing is different. Okay, we are going to do steps 20 and 22 together because they are relevant to each other. Okay, in step 20, we're going to assemble steering linkages, and in step 22, we're going to bolt those onto the chassis. Step 21, I just feel is out of order. We're just bolting down the front bumper and the retaining plate for that, and it's just not relevant to these two steps. I would have put it further along. In any event, let's go ahead and do those two steps together. So the first thing we're going to do is push bearings into these two steering linkages. If you are using bushings and you did not get a bearing kit, which I really don't recommend, but you know, if you're on a budget, you're on a budget. As I recall, the standard bearings, not the ceramic bearings, but a decent set of sealed bearings is only about $19, and it's definitely worth adding. It will greatly improve the performance of the vehicle. Also, its longevity. In any event, if you are going with the bushings, there are no bushings in the bushing package for these two items. They're on one of the parts trees. They're on the A parts tree. These two, you just make sure that when you trim these off, you don't have any flashing, because that'll just prevent these from moving properly. So you just slide the bearings into place. You want to make sure they're pointing down flush, otherwise they try to bind on you as you push them in. Okay, so now you want these parts facing down so you have a flat surface, and then we're going to attach one of these linkages to each arm. And so what you want to do is look carefully at this arm. It has one side that's a bit rounded and another side that's very flat. You want the screw to go through the flat side and the rounded side against the I'm not sure whether these are trailing arms or just linkages of one kind or another. In any event, you want to use the rounded side down because that'll have the minimum amount of contact, and you want the flat side against the screw. And let's make sure that we're orienting these properly. If you look carefully, you can see there's a small dot and then there's no dot over here. The dot side does not get the linkage, so you want to put it in the side without the dot. And definitely make sure that you screw this straight in. You don't want it going offline. It's a fairly soft plastic, so it goes in nice and easy. Just turn it gently until it stops, just like with the shock absorbers. And it should move freely. Okay, again, find the round side goes down, and you attach to the side that does not have the little dot. Okay, now we need these two long grub screws, and you'll need an Allen wrench for that. And you're going to screw them into these two holes at the front of the chassis on either side of the drive shaft. let me just show you that next step here. They need to be screwed in so that there's only 5 millimeters protruding. And let me just try to get this into a good light for you so you can see this hole and this hole are where we want to put those 2 grub screws. And I'm just going to use this cheap little caliper to get my 5 millimeter measurement. And I still have a little ways to go. A little more. That looks good. Then you're going to take one of these barrels. They're threaded from both sides. And you're going to just twist that into place. And finger tight will do. It's going to tighten up all on its own. And so now we're going to place these with the dot facing the rear over the barrel like that. And we're going to screw it to the outer hole. Now the inner hole you might want to experiment with. I think using the inner hole would give you more Ackerman. If you don't know what Ackerman is, that takes a little bit of explanation, but I'll try to give you a short version. When a vehicle goes around a turn, the radius of that turn is shorter for the inner wheel than the outer wheel. In other words, the inner wheel, if you're taking a right, the right-hand tire is the inner wheel. That wheel is going around a shorter curve, a tighter curve, if you will. And so to not have tire chafe, Ackerman is basically a calculation of how much more the inner tire turns in versus the outer tire, so that the outer tire is taking an easier turn. If they were to be exact, one tire is trying to take a lighter turn, the inner one, and the outer turn is trying to turn sharper, and you're going to have tire slippage and chafing, and it's not going to handle well. So that's a basic explanation of Ackerman. Now, more or less Ackerman and how that affects steering is relative to, whether you're on a paved surface or an off-road surface. It has to do with how quickly the vehicle is going to turn in. So in other words, a light amount of stick, the car may, want to, quickly turn, or it may struggle to turn with less Ackerman. So that kind of gives you some idea of what's involved in that. And that's definitely a subject for a much longer discussion about handling and vehicle setup, which we're not going to do right now. So that's about 5 millimeters. And again, we are screwing the arm onto the outer hole. So there we have two steering linkages. There's obviously going to be a connecting linkage, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Now, this is about the time when we're going to want to have our servo out and ready. So I'm going to get to that in a moment. I've got to get that out, and we'll go ahead and mount a servo in here.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.